the longest time, it has been the stuff of science fiction, perhaps the closest thing to immortality human beings might achieve. This idea of taking somebody on their deathbed and freezing or preserving their body, holding it in suspended animation until a cure can be found or some way to reanimate them. Well, it's not so crazy. For decades, this American company has been researching this very possibility, and although the technology to bring people back from the dead still isn't quite there, facilities to store your body, like this one here in Arizona, are doing it for a price, of course. Ted Williams, one of the baseball's all-time greats, is reportedly kept there in that facility. Now, in BC, you cannot have your body preserved and stored because that service is illegal in this province. But now a local nonprofit is challenging that law, filing a notice of civil claim in BC Supreme Court saying that it infringes on people's charter rights of life and liberty. Now, the lawsuit claims that British Columbia is the only jurisdiction in the world to outlaw cryonics, which is the storing and preservation of human remains for future resuscitation. And the penalties are stiff. Under BC's Funeral Services Act, a person who breaks the law can be fined $10,000 and jailed up to 12 months. A company can be fined as much as $100,000, and even beyond that, if that wasn't enough, a court can increase the fine, if need be, up to 3 times the amount a company profited from offering the service in the first place. So now's a good time to bring in Carrie Wong, who is the president of the Lifespan Society of British Columbia, one of the plaintiffs in this case. And Mrs. Wong, my understanding is, from what you've told me, that you've already signed up in the States to be cryonically frozen. Let me start by asking you, why?
Well, basically, I love life, and if I can get another shot at life in the future, why not? I have nothing to lose by freezing my body after all of modern medicine cannot save me, so perhaps medicine and nanotechnology in the future will progress to such a point that it's possible to take my body out of cold storage, repair the damage of vitrification and cooling, and also what killed me in the first place.
Now, I suppose the issue at play right now is whether or not the practice is legal or should become legal in British Columbia. And I do wonder if the potential for abuse is there. I mean, after all, you'd be paying a lot of money, presumably, for something that may never happen. And the person who's frozen certainly wouldn't have any recourse if it doesn't.
Well, there's two major cryonics organizations in the United States. They've been legally operating for 40 years, and they do not make any wild promises. They don't guarantee that will work. But people that sign up are generally well informed, or they read into the science and think that this is the best shot that they have. I mean, people that believe that their memories, personalities, their identity is stored in their physical form, why not preserve their brain and their body? Because that's what they believe is central to their identity. And preserving those structures and the brain itself, if you can preserve that well enough, then it's possible that the damage can be repaired. Because we believe that our identity, our memories, our personality, and anything that's important is stored inside our brain and body. So
you talk about. I'll just jump in here because I just have one more question for you. I mean, you talk about the brain, you talk about memories and why that's important. I do wonder, hypothetically, let's say you're frozen, you're revived 150 years from now. You have no job, no home, no friends, no family. Every person you've ever known has died. Is that a good thing for society, for a lot of people to undertake?
I know that it's the right choice for myself, and people should have the right to do it if they want to. There's not that many cryonicists in the world, but we know each other. So if it works for me, I'm sure it's going to work for the person I'm getting married to, my friends who are signed up, and honestly, I hope more people sign up so I can wake up with more people that I knew while I was alive. But I understand it's not a choice for everyone, but I think we should have the right to make our end-of-life choices. Canadians won the right to assisted suicide this year, and I think that Canadians should have the right to attempt to extend their life in the future as well.
All right, Carrie Wong, it is an interesting, fascinating subject to discuss. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. I do want to bring in right now Dr. Carrie Bowman, who's a bioethicist at the University of Toronto. And Dr. Bowman, you heard some of the arguments being made there, but I'm curious to know, from your point of view, what are some of the greater questions, perhaps the more difficult questions that you think need to be answered, need to be resolved before something like this goes forward?
Well, there's sort of large societal questions in terms of, now this sounds all very strange to us right now, but, is there an obligation to die? Do people really have a responsibility after being born to eventually have a responsibility to die and move on? I mean, that's certainly been forwarded. I'm not necessarily against this, by the way. I just think it's very, very complex. Even 20 years ago, this seemed more outrageous than it does now, because as technology advances, it's still absolutely impossible by 2015 standards. But whether that will continue to be true, we simply don't know. But here's the thing. I wonder if we're not pushing some of the ethical questions into, and I'm making this up almost when I say the 23rd century, because I don't know what century it would be, but some future century where in fact technology does exist, and they have this complex situation of significant amounts of people that have been cryopreserved, and how to resuscitate, not just biologically, but how to reintegrate such people into society, and what the obligation of a future society would be to people coming from this era. I don't think we've really thought through some of the ethical dilemmas we may be putting on future generations with this.
Yeah, and you talk about, it was really interesting the way you put it, this responsibility to die. Because you look at the world right now, there are a lot of people on the planet Earth.
There really is.
Could only get worse, I suppose.
And it's complex. And if you were to be resuscitated, I don't know if that's even the correct word, but resurrected, I guess, so to speak, it may also be very costly to future generations in terms of what's required. And at what point would they do it? When they've just barely got the technology? Would they wait another 50 or 100 years? So again, I'm not necessarily against this, but I see a lot of ethical dilemmas in a future society that we will not be around to even grasp.
Well, what's clear is there is a lot to talk about on that subject. Dr. Carrie Bowman, so good of you to join us.
Thank you.
So, who among you want to be in line to be cryonically preserved? You heard some of the back and forth, but let us know what you think of this idea. Would you do it? I'm on Twitter, @AndrewChangCBC, and of course, as we get responses, we'll share some of them just a little bit later in the newscast.